I'm excited because track laying has finally commenced on NOTLOB. Hi everyone and welcome back to Newton Grove. Well, it's been a very busy 2025 between Model World Live, the greatest gathering in Derby, the Great Electric Train Show and everything else in between with Hobby Magazine and everything else that's going on in my life. I haven't had a lot of spare time, and if I haven't been down here working on the model very much. But I'm happy to say, just like in the introduction, that track laying has finally commenced here on NOTLOB. I know that when you look behind me, it doesn't really look like that, but it has actually started. And I'll tell you what, now that I have started, I'm really excited to keep going. What I've started with here is probably what's going to become the backbone of the entire layout, the skeleton as such of all the track work. And what you can see right here in front of me, reaching out to that black 5 over there, is that skeleton. Because we've got all this track down now. Now, none of it's actually glued down, it isn't pinned properly, it's just been tacked in. The holes have been drilled for all the wire droppers for the point work and the track work, and everything has got some rail joiners in there. It's not secured to the board just yet. Getting this part down here correct, in alignment, nice and straight with the curves the way they need to be and so forth has been paramount, because now that this has been done, we can lay the track into the turntable and then off to the storage yard behind the camera. We can also start laying the track behind me, which will lead into the steaming bays and the loco shed, and then of course the two tracks in the background over here, they can be done last of all because they're not part of the main integral structure of the layout. So let me talk you through the process of what we started with, why we started with that, and how it's all progressing. So if you look down the very back of the layout over there behind the black 5, we have got our first set of points. Now this is coming off our Fiddle yard and will basically be running next to the eventual locomotive shed. Getting that one in position and perfectly straight was absolutely key. So what we did is we measured it from the back of the baseboard so that the entire point was completely level and straight. Once that was done, we drew it on the baseboard, we drilled the holes for all the wire droppers, and then we pinned that particular set of points onto the board. As I said, paramount, because if that was wonky or out of alignment, it would actually make the entire layout from that side look a little bit strange. So that was the first thing we did. We cut a small piece of flexi-track to fit between that set of points and the Markway 3 point. Oh, and by the way, I might just add that all the flexi-track for NOTLOB has been generously donated by Ellis Clark Trains of Skipton. So if you need to get yourself flat bottom rail or bullhead rail, any O-gauge track for that matter, then Ellis Clark Trains is the place to go. In fact, apart from the Markway 3 point, every single piece of track work on this layout has either been bought or supplied by Ellis Clark Trains. So make sure you go off there and get your stuff. Speaking of the Markway point, this is going to always be a little bit interesting. If we have a look at Pico track work, the thickness of the sleepers is basically about 3 millimeters, whereas Markway use copper-clad sleepers, and the thickness of those is 1 mil. So there's a few ways around this. Now, if you watch Simon George's Heat and Lodge videos, you'll see that he's just recently installed a Markway point as well around his new station, and he fitted some card underneath to raise it to the right level. And that's fantastic. I think it works for him. It's a mainline station, not a problem. What I'm trying to achieve here is, and you'll see this in future videos, is being a yard, you haven't got ballast packed all the way to the top, especially when it comes to like the throat of the yard and so forth. And eventually you'll see me cut all the webbing off of the track work. And the reason for this is because if the ballast hasn't gone completely to the top of the sleepers or the bottom of the rail, then the webbing stands out like a sore thumb. And on Newton Grove I did the same thing. I cut all the webbing out. It's a tedious job, and if that 9-foot layout was anything to go by, it's going to take ages to do NOTLOB. But the results are worth it. And with the Markway point, I had to raise it up, and I didn't want to have 2 millimeters of card underneath. I wanted to get that separation between the bottom of the rail and the ground. So what I've done, if you look at the photographs here, is I've cut some plastic card strips, essentially sleeper by sleeper, and I have built up 1 mil at a time the sleepers underneath this Markway point. Now, I've had some comments on Facebook, people are saying, why are you doing that? Just put some card underneath, or why aren't you using Pico components, for example? Well, I purchased that Markway point secondhand off a modeler who purchased it himself, never did anything with it, and I got it that particular way, and I'm basically just improvising. And that's a good thing with model railways. You do what you feel is best for you, depending on what you want to get at the end result. And like I said, I want to be able to see the ground and the gap between the rail and the ground. So that's why I'm raising them up. Anyway, I digress. Moving further down there, we now have our first baseboard joint. So we've got a small piece of flexi-track which we've cut between the three-way point and our next set of Pico points just over here. That was tedious, I might add. Just those two sets of points leading onto the second board was a bit of work. Happily though, everything else has been a little bit more straightforward. So we've got the set of points there, the double slip, another piece of flexi-track over here which we've cut over the board joint here as well, and then we have two more points over here. So yeah, it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but what I've done is I've rolled the black 5 because those things roll very freely. I've rolled it all the way from one end of the layout to the end of the track work over here, and the geometry is perfect. Nothing comes off the track. The wheels ride smoothly. It doesn't kink or anything. And if you put your eye onto track level and look down there, it's perfectly straight and the curves are where they're meant to be. It's wonderful. And that's the thing. Taking the time to really get that right is paramount, because you see a lot of people who put track down, and when you're getting close, especially for me when I'm taking photographs of layouts, you start to see how disjointed it is. Now obviously the real railways are like that, but in a model, if it's too warpy or too kinky, behave, then it's very, very noticeable. So getting the track geometry looking as perfect as possible has been crucial to this project. So the next steps now, we've got a few more points obviously. There's some over here, there's a few more behind me, so they will start to go down. What we're going to do is we're going to get all the track work in toward the turntable pit done first. So that is now completely finished, and then we will install the track work from the double slip all the way out beyond the turntable to the other side of the board. And then after that we can start putting in the two back roads and eventually start putting in our yard down there. Now I mentioned that none of this has actually been put down just yet. One of the things that we do at Hornby magazine, this is something that Mike Wild showed me, is it's always good to put your track down, cut your flexi track to length and position it on the board so you can see it's working first. There's really nothing to be gained from cut, glue, put it down, because if you need to alter something later on, it's best to just, take up the track pin, move things around, and then tack it back down again. If you start gluing as you're going, then you could run into some troubles, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. It double handles the work, but at the same time, once everything goes down and I start to put the ballast and everything else down, I do not intend to lift this track at all. I did the very same thing with Newton Grove, and I've never had to touch that once, actually. It works. So like I say, it's a bit more involved, but getting good track down is a crucial step. I know that we're always excited to run trains and get the thing moving and powered up, but if you speed through track laying without making sure it's all the way it's meant to be, then you're going to regret it later on. The biggest thing for us, of course, is making sure that the droppers are in, that everything is where it's meant to be, because you don't want to be forgetting things as you go along. So, like I say, it's short video but sweet video, and I'm just happy that track laying has now commenced. So hopefully today, as I'm recording this, we'll come back and we'll start putting some more down, and in coming weeks you will actually start to see this come to life. So make sure you stick around for the NOTLOB series as we go along. Now, final shout out once again to Ellis Clark Trains in Skipton for sponsoring all the flexible track. I really appreciate it, and like I say, if you are building an O-gauge model railway, make sure you go off to Ellis Clark Trains for all your point work and track work, locomotives, rolling stock and the like, because I personally think that if you're getting into O-gauge, or even if you're a senior O-gauge modeler, Ellis Clark Trains are one of the leading O-gauge specialists in the UK. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Right, now you know the drill. Please like, subscribe, and everything else like that. I really appreciate your support. Also, keep sending me your submissions for the virtual O-gauge exhibition, because I've got more of those planned. Thank you to everyone who's already submitted. I will be putting together a second episode very, very soon. Right, well, it's time to get more track down here on NOTLOB, so I will see you next time on Newton Grove.